There are many, many animal attack movies out there. Some are great, some are average. Some have that horrible CGI that looks like it was put together by a stoned college student who wasn't entirely sure if his mouse was a real mouse, or maybe a rat, or perhaps the controls of a time-travelling spaceship that, if caressed the right way, might possibly recreate the girl from Weird Science. And then, just under that blocky, unrealistic, poorly acted, badly directed mess, you have this latest edition in the world of what the hell were they thinking that would be better placed on one of those YouTube fail compilations than in a cinema. Like a car crash, I didn't really want to see all the blood, gore and dismembered body parts, but I rubbernecked my way through it anyway. This movie was horrific. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the worst movie I ever saw. But if it wasn't, it must certainly be tied, because I really don't remember the last time I watched a movie where everything that happened on screen was ridiculous and dumb, to the point where it had to have been a conscious decision by the filmmaker to choose the most arse-backward retarded decisions available at every turn. And if you missed one, I'm sure the actors piped up with their genius idea of how they can make their characters more unlikable, more moronic than the director even realized was possible. This movie manages to make nature look stupid. It manages to make humans look stupid. It manages to make even the concept of scary animal movies look stupid, which really pissed me off because I like this genre. Ever since I first watched Jaws, The Birds, Cujo, The Ghost in the Darkness, Alligator, these movies have always had a special place for me because it isn't the fear of the unknown, which many horror movies rely on for their scares. No. This is the fear of the known. These are all creatures that we grew up with, whether it be from history books, children's stories, school lessons. We are all aware of all these creatures, and we, for the most part, know how dangerous they can be under the right circumstances. Okay, maybe being attacked by birds is a bit far-fetched, but sharks, lions, tigers, bears, crocodiles, snakes, even man's best friend, all have terrifying real-life stories attached to them. And each of them could eat you or I for dinner if we were caught in the wrong circumstances. Speaking of which, Idris Elba manages to get himself into the wrong circumstances in this movie. Of course he manages to do it through a series of extraordinarily dumb events. Here is a summary of how Idris Elba found himself at the mercy of a lion. First off, we have a lion that, while just doing liony things like eating the wildlife and sleeping, has a nasty encounter with a group of home invaders, and before you can say, isn't this the plot of Death Wish? He is out there on the mean streets of the savannah, taking down the bad guys and getting revenge for what happened to his wives and daughters. It has to be said that Bronson, as I shall henceforth be calling him, is not the most discerning lion, and doesn't have the patience for large amounts of time-consuming surveillance. So instead decides that it is simply to kill all of the humans, rather than have to figure out which one specifically had wronged him. And so, to that end, he kills a couple of the home invaders, poachers, before moving on and killing a whole village of innocent two-legged, probably not home invaders, poachers. Perhaps he had read Animal Farm and agreed with the concept of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. We can't be sure of Bronson's educational background. He is a shadowy, inscrutable figure that doesn't give much away. The only thing we can be sure of is that he holds a grudge, and he doesn't hang about when it comes to settling a score. Another thing we know for damn sure is that the human cast of this movie are for the most part retarded, moronic fools whose existence on this planet is a sad indictment of the educational system, because Idris Elba, and I know this is hard to believe if you have watched the movie, is seriously supposed to be a doctor, and yet he has the intelligence of a warm glass of water. I have never seen one person put so many different appendages into the mouth of a lion in my life, and I'm combining every event that has ever passed before my eyes, including all those movies and idiots on the internet. And you know what makes this utterly stupid? Is the fact that he didn't lose any of them. Not one. By the end of the movie, he still has the same number of arms and legs and hands and feet as he started with, which is not even remotely believable for a man whose hobby seems to be seeing how often and how long he can insert body parts into lions' mouths. It gets to the point where you just really want the lion to stop pissing about and bite something off of him. If only at least to give the movie some real stakes and a sense that perhaps there isn't going to be quite such a happy ending. And then we have Dr. Dumb's daughters, who are a chip off the old block and probably have about the same number of brain cells as an old block of wood. And when they weren't complaining that there's no internet and that their mother had died at some point in the past, they were wandering off even after being told specifically by Dr. Dumb to stay in the car. Anyway, back to the synopsis. The next morning, after the home invasion that led Bronson to begin his one-line genocide of the human race, Idris Elba, in his role as Dr. Dumb, arrives in Africa with his 2 daughters on some sort of a trip to visit the area where his dead wife's tribe came from, which is no doubt the reason this piece of tosh even got made. Hollywood went, oh my god, we can have an animal attack survival movie and diversity and black representation at the same time? It's a dream come true. And then didn't notice that the only African person in the main cast is a white guy. Speaking of the white guy, he is a friend of Dr. Dumb's that they are visiting because he is a childhood friend of the dead mum and also went to university with Dr. Dumb. At first, he seems knowledgeable and intelligent, but then he takes Dr. Dumb and his kids on a safari, and they encounter a village where everyone has been killed by a lion, and so they do the right thing and run away. While running away, they come across an injured man who doesn't seem too badly hurt since he was up and walking. But on seeing Dr. Dumb, he takes a nasty turn. Dr. Dumb then jumps into action and goes to the back of the truck to grab some important first aid supplies that will no doubt give him a fighting chance of saving this poor, badly injured man. And after a quick conversation with his daughters, he returns to the man with his life-saving supply of what do you think he chose? Bandages? Painkillers? Alcohol to clean his wound? Or a needle and thread to stitch him back together? Nope. Who needs that rubbish when you can have a nice clean pair of rubber gloves? Yes, rubber gloves. I am almost shocked he wasn't wearing a face mask too, as we all know that is the most life-saving device on the planet. Jam one on the poor guy's injured face and I'm sure he would have made a miraculous recovery. Unbelievably, the rubber gloves fail to save the injured man, and in the meantime, Dr. Dumb's friend, the white guy, has wandered off in search of the lion with his trusty rifle. On finding the lion, he manages to not shoot the lion because he was caught by surprise by a lion in a very open area where the lion would have had to have been snorkeling in a nearby river or hiding behind a tree wheezing like Muttley at the joke for him to manage it. After that, Dr. Dumb and the 2 daughters Dumb are attacked in the car by the lion. The good Dr. Dumb then sees how long and how often you can stick your legs into the face of a lion without it managing to either claw them badly or bite them off. The answer, as it turns out, is far longer than is feasibly likely. At this point, Dr. Dumb's daughters exemplarize female drivers by helpfully crashing the truck onto the ledge of a ravine, so that even if it would run again, which apparently it couldn't after having turned the key just once, there is no way it was going anywhere. Now we are stuck with a prolonged scene of the lion stalking the truck in a kind of bored and disinterested way that only gets interesting when Idris contacts the white guy on a radio and tells him to cauterize his wound with a penknife and a lighter. Now, I don't know what kind of lighter the white guy owns. It looked a very standard Zippo to me, but his lighter was capable of heating a blade to glowing red hot within mere seconds. So, next time you're sitting there in your pants, thinking that what I really want to do right now is forge myself a Lord of the Rings sword, well now you know. You don't need to go to the effort of building a forge with a sophisticated system of bellows and special combinations of coal and charcoal, because all you really need is an old Zippo. It's a weight off my mind, I can tell you. Anyway, one of the daughters, Dumb, remembers that there is a tranquilizer gun in the truck, so the good dumb doctor decides to shoot the lion with the tranq gun, which for once was entirely logical. But since this is Dr. Dumb and the daughters Dumb, nothing is as sensible as it seems, and after a radio chat with the white guy, they try to figure out where the white guy is. Idris then stands on top of the truck with the gun, waiting for a chance to shoot the lion. But one of the daughters Dumb decides that this is the perfect time to go running out of the car to look for the white guy. As she does so, Bronson suddenly appears and says to himself, "Aha! Trying to escape, are you? Well, I'm onto your game, you slippery two-footed curs." Apparently Bronson is also an upper-class English lion. So it turns out that Dr. Dumb is also a terrible shot, which must have been because Idris Elba's American accent was so bad that even the gun didn't believe that he was actually American. And since in Britain we simply aren't allowed to have guns, at least unless you live on a farm and can give the police something vaguely approaching a good reason for owning a boomstick, poor Idris is just not good. So Idris misses, and the lion makes him drop the gun and fall off the truck's roof. Dr. Dumb then uses his immense intellect to figure out that sheltering under the car is his only option, which he does, but Bronson isn't going to let him get away with that easily and says, "Well, aren't you the clever little two-legged freak? Well, two can play at that game, what? How about you?" And tries to crawl under the car after the doctor. But Dr. Dumb again resorts to his favourite activity of seeing how long and how often he can wave his feet in a lion's face without getting them bitten off. And again, the answer seems to be for as long as is necessary, since his feet seem to have some sort of immunity from vicious-looking lion teeth. Then one of the daughters Dumb manages to apply her brain and stabs the lion with a tranq dart through the truck's window. Bronson then staggers away crying, "Egads! They've got me! I'm sorry, Mama, Papa, my beautiful wives. I was unable to finish avenging you by destroying these evil two-footed blighters. Thus, I die." And he slinks off to wait for his expected demise. Not much of the drug went into Bronson, who then climbs to the top of an overlooking bluff while he figures out his next move. In the meantime, darkness falls, and everyone has a bit of a kip. Dr. Dumb dreams about his dead wife, dressed up as though she still lived with her African village, which I'm sure is still the only reason anyone funded this movie. Next thing you know, the home invaders, poachers, are back to invade a new home. Poach some more lions or something. But instead of lions, they find Dr. Dumb and the daughters Dumb in a truck with the white guy, who one of the daughters Dumb actually managed to rescue while the lion was feeling a little woozy from the tranquilizer. Well, it turns out the white guy isn't popular with home invaders, poachers, because we learn that he had previously killed 3 poachers. Then the shit hits the fan because Bronson, who happens to have been keeping an eye on the Dr. Dumb, chooses this moment to yell, "Parkour!" and leaps into the fray, taking out one of the poachers in what is a very acrobatic jump, but one which he was clearly not going to land. We can only assume that Bronson wanted to look good for the cameras. The poachers then run off into the darkness, where Bronson can pick them off one by one. Dr. Dumb then decides that he can just nick one of the poachers' trucks, but the key is not in the ignition. And so, since he has no idea how to hotwire cars, he needs to go off into the darkness in which Bronson is making short work of the tasty poachers and find the juicy morsel that has the keys. Dr. Dumb then wanders carefully into the brush carrying his trusty pocket knife as a defense against a 500-pound force of nature armed with muscles a bodybuilder would kill for and teeth that could punch through steel. Still, it could be worse. He could have stayed in the car with his daughters. So, our hero, the good Dr. Dumb, then proceeds to find the lion. Now, I haven't up to this point described Bronson as being deaf, but apparently he is, because Dr. Dumb blunders into some sort of voodoo African tree art that rattles away as though it were part of a mariachi band. And even though the lion was 30 feet away, it didn't hear a thing. But Bronson, being a suspicious type of lion, comes over to the tree to check things out anyway. On arrival, he finds there is nothing there, so without looking up to the branch just a couple of feet over his head where Dr. Dumb is perched, or even sniffing the air, he just walks off again. Now, I mentioned sniffing the air because Dr. Dumb must be reeking of sweat at this point, and would probably put a hyena off of his roadkill were he to catch a whiff. So how the hell a lion, which was only just below him, missed him, I have no idea. Perhaps we all need some of Dr. Dumb's deodorant because that shit must be good. All of a sudden, we find Dr. Dumb wading through a nearby river. Why? Who knows? He just is. And after another near miss with the lion, Dr. Dumb finally wades out of the river, right up to the guy with the keys, so yay for convoluted unlikely plot lines. Meanwhile, back with the daughters Dumb, Bronson realises that cars are basically tins of sardines, and that if he can just peel back the lid, he can sample the fishy delights inside. Not that I'm claiming there is anything fishy about the daughters Dumb. I'm sure their hygiene is exemplary. Anyway, the daughters Dumb have a quick game of put your foot in the lion's mouth, then White Guy saves them by basically holding the lion's neck so that he can't get out of the car window. Now, if you're imagining a chimpanzee attempting to restrain Godzilla, then you know how ridiculous this looks. Then all of a sudden, the car, which seemed quite happily stuck at the top of the ravine, suddenly manages to fall off, taking the lion and the white guy with it, and after a few nasty rolls, Bronson gets up and walks it off. But unfortunately for the white guy, this tin of sardines is all the way open, and while he tries to crawl out of the windscreen, Bronson spies the open rear end and thinks, "Good show, what? I have always liked a rear entry," and climbs into the car. The white guy, realizing there is no escape due to his injuries, spots that the truck is leaking petrol all over the place, and with a very heavy heart, he apologizes to Bronson and sets them both on fire. The car is engulfed in a fireball, and we can all look away and ponder at the bravery of the white guy, and the sadness of poor Bronson having his genocidal dreams of human extermination ended in such a horrible way. It brings a tear to your eye. Or it would if we gave a crap, but since there is almost no emotional investment in anything that happens because it just makes no sense, and we all have our foreheads screwed up in the classic expression of, what? Why am I watching something so stupid? The emotional aspect of the scene is lost in a deafening chorus of mental meh. But I digress. Now Dr. Dumb finally returns from his very successful pitch black key hunt and finds that one of his daughters who was playing Wave the Body part in the lion's mouth has surprisingly managed to be injured. I thought we had established at this point that waving various body parts in lions' faces was just a harmless bit of sport. But no, suddenly there are consequences for stupidity. Dr. Dumb then stands for a while at the top of the ravine with a look of consternation and grief that I assume was for the white guy, but could just as easily be about the loss of the truck, which was a noble warrior in the endless battle against the harsh African elements. It could also have been the result of an oncoming case of diarrhea after his immersion in the diseased and bacteria-laden waters of the nearby river. We can't be sure, but what we can be sure of is that the saga of Dr. Dumb and Bronson the genocidal lion is not over, because the movie still has another 20 minutes of excruciating runtime left. It is now the next day, and finally they are able to escape using the poachers' now ownerless Land Rover. Unfortunately, it's low on petrol, and with one of his daughters injured, Dr. Dumb decides to pull over at the nearest service station, come abandoned school building, to search for a first aid kit. Because as we all know, all apparently abandoned buildings contain a first aid kit that in a pinch will contain all required medical supplies from plasma to gauze to intricately devised brain surgery tools. On finding said mythical first aid kit, Dr. Dumb proceeds to pick up a couple of napkins and a bottle of booze. And then, by thoroughly examining the wound through the slight hole in his daughter's clothes, randomly pours the alcohol over her clothing, and possibly onto the wound. Then, stuffing napkins in the tear, and tying her jumper loosely round her waist, pronounces her basically healed. Dr. Dumb then wanders off in search of, something, probably spare brain cells. I mean, he damn well needs them. A barely singed Bronson, realizing that this is now his cue to continue his persecution of the remarkably stupid though lucky two-legged probable home-invading monsters from last night, chooses this moment to walk through the old school's doors, which the good Dr. Dumb had the foresight to leave wide open. Bronson, seeing the daughter's Dumb, cries, "Aha! You scurvy curs! Thought you escaped me, did you? Well, let me tell you, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." Just at this moment, the Dr. Dumb, using a Kalashnikov that he found in the Land Rover, comes running in, randomly firing into the ground because, after all, rifles are not at all sporting, and hearing Bronson's clear English accent, he knew that fair play was of vital importance in this situation. Bronson, not being sure if the two-legged idiot knew the Queensberry rules, chose the better part of valor and legged it out of the door. Having successfully fired all of his ammunition into the floor, Dr. Dumb then drops the rifle and helps his daughters escape into an equally abandoned outbuilding. Dr. Dumb then announces that they need to split up, because together they aren't going to make it, because the lion isn't going to stop. To which his daughters reply, "No!" But it is okay, because the doctor tells them he knows what he is doing. He then steps outside and leads the lion into an open area, before proceeding to have a fist fight with the lion. No, you didn't mishear. His "I know what I'm doing" plan was to get his little pocket knife and try to kill a lion with his bare hands. Bronson, recognizing that Dr. Dumb was in fact willing to be sporting, gives him a fighting chance by at no point attempting to kill him. I can only commend Bronson for his control, because you would have thought that a lion would tear off a man's head simply by accident, since they are so strong and we as humans are comparatively very weak. We can only assume that Bronson, in his polite English way, had been giving his victims a sporting chance, and so had realised after the first 4 or 5 times he punched people's heads off that he needs to use a bit less force on the average home invader. Dr. Dumb then proceeds to square up and give the lion the old 1-2, but surprisingly it has no effect, and he is forced to spend the majority of the fight trying not to be mauled to death. Bronson, on the other hand, is having a great time pretending to be seriously trying to kill the apparently mentally deficient doctor. He bites him all over the place, although never hard enough to actually cause a notable injury. All of a sudden, another couple of male lions turn up and start to attack Bronson, who is understandably rather annoyed because no matter how much he explains the situation and warns them of the two-legged home-invading menace, they just don't seem to get it, and sadly are also apparently not English lions, as they don't believe in a fair fight and gang up on him 2-1. And so ends Bronson's dream of a world free of the two-legged menace. A world free of home invaders, murderers and rug makers. I think we should all stop and have a minute's silence for Bronson, the digital lion. Okay, that's about a Hollywood minute, so back to the review. The Doctor then passes out from what can only be assumed his blood loss, although he really hasn't gained any significant injuries bar the apparent brain issue, but that was a pre-existing condition, so not relevant to the current state of injuredness. He is simply in a state of injury, rather than being specifically injured. Anyway, he wakes up in a hospital after another ethnic dream about his dead wife to be met with the sight of the daughter's dumb, looking very earnest and caring. Ah, family is so important. Unless of course you're a lion, because no one mentions the loss of Bronson's family. And here endeth the movie. A movie in which we learned that lions are often English, and would probably prefer to wear top hats and a suit. We also learned that while it is all fun and games to play wave the body part in the lion's mouth, sometimes, just sometimes, accidents can happen, and people can get mildly injured, so let's not forget that just because something is harmless doesn't mean that random accidents can't happen. Another lesson, and I think this is the most important one, was that stupid people do stupid things, and no matter how much we would all like to save them from themselves, at some point, like a little bird randomly throwing itself out of a nest 100 foot up, they have to fly on their own, and like that little bird, they will sometimes go splat on the rocks below. But that is life. Life finds a way to weed out the incompetent and the foolish. So when you are feeling down and thinking that the world simply doesn't care, think about all those poor, stupid little birds learning to fly, and remember that at least you're not one of them. Ah, what an emotional roller coaster we've all been through. I don't know about you, but I am exhausted and looking forward to a nice cup of tea and maybe a cat nap, while I ponder how Hollywood is so shallow that just including some ethnic nonsense and a fairly well-known face was enough to get one of the dumbest wild animal movies I've ever had the misfortune to encounter made. This has been Movies Suck, longing for the days when it was the story that made movies worthwhile, not whether or not it had a hint of diversity. Go check out The Ghost in the Darkness if you want a lion movie with teeth and a spooky true story running in the background. Oh, and a whole load of real diversity. Signing out, leave a like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the flip side.